Well, this Z-Files is indeed on the road, but I'm also right on the water. We are on the south side of the Intracoastal as it goes by Fort Walton Beach. So if you figure your geography and you know it, I would have to be on Okaloosa Island.
Beautiful
and that's
Okaloosa.
beautiful Okaloosa Island. And I'm here in the home of a man who I'm going to say, and I described this to Pat Holland, and I think she agreed with me, kind of caused a political revolution, or was the beginner of the revolution of the change of the world of politics in Okaloosa County, a gentleman by the name of Mike Mitchell. Mike, it's so good to meet you.
I appreciate the opportunity to talk.
Okay, well, I gather over your years I hear that that's not been a problem for you.
No, I've always been able to talk. Maybe I didn't say anything, but I was always able to talk.
Okay. Well, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to hold up a photograph here, and then you're going to see it on the screen in full view, but you'll recognize the man as being Ronald Reagan, and the fellow that he is shaking hands with was a rather young Mike Mitchell. How old were you in that picture?
Younger than I am now.
Well, we know that.
Let's see, how old was I in 76? 65.
You were a mature gentleman by then.
Yes.
Okay. Now, what I've also got here is that same photograph that was made into a postcard, and on the back it is printed. It says, "You wanted straight government in Okaloosa County, and I've given it." Being the, quote, loyal opposition for 8 years proved productive. We no longer hold special meetings in smoke-filled trailers over holidays or otherwise, and we won't do so again. I'm willing to serve another 4 and offer the same values. I'd appreciate your vote November 6th. P.S. His name Mike is signed. So P.S. I'm the one on the right. So you'll see that in full view on the screen as we were talking about it. So that's what we're going to talk about is what happened in this county way back when this fellow was no longer a young man, but he had a very interesting career before he ever got into local politics and government. So for that, Mike, I want to get a bio out of you, where you were born, where you grew up, went to school roughly, so that the people who are tuning in and seeing this, we have a lot of people who are in Okaloosa County who didn't live here when you were involved in county government, so they don't know the history of all of this. And since I'm one of these history buffs, Pat Holland and a lot of other friends of mine are, Jerry Milligan, I've heard them talk about you so many different times and what you did in the early days. So I felt it was time, and then I saw your picture. I said, well, he's still around, you know. I hadn't heard them talk about you much, so I said, well, let's find out what he's up to. So first of all, let's get you up to from the beginning of your life to where you were now thinking about. You were in Okaloosa County deciding to get into political office.
Frankly, I feel like a native, but I'm not a native. I was born in Honolulu, Hawaii, where my father was a building contractor. I grew up in Fresno, California, which was my family's historic home. I went to Fresno State College, where I was a pre-med student, but I decided I'd rather fly airplanes, and I joined the Air Force in 1951 as an aviation cadet and went to flying school at Greenville, Mississippi. That was my introduction to the South. And I went to advanced flying school at Selma, Alabama, Craig Field, and flew P-51s. And I spent the next 20 years in the Air Force flying airplanes. And when I retired from the Air Force, they said, where are you going to retire? Are you going back to California? I said, no, I'm going to Fort Walton Beach, Florida. They said, why? And I said, well, I have a house on the beach, number one. And number two, they've got a wonderful public school system, and I have 4 children to educate. So that's how I ended up here, and I built this house.
Okay. So you've been here on the island ever since you moved here?
Yes.
You were one of the. Now, how many houses were out here on the? What year did you retire to here?
Let me see. 1973.
Okay. Now, part of your career, you had told me that you were at Dukefield.
Yes, that was right when I came back from Korea in 1953, I was assigned to Duke Field in the fall of '53, flying drones. And
Now, how did you fly a drone? A drone usually doesn't have a pilot. You were.
I was the guy flying the drone from another aircraft.
I got you.
From a T-30. I was in a T-33. My friend Frank Harrison was flying the T-33, and I was flying the drone F-80, QF-80, by radio control.
Okay. And what was the purpose? Was that for warfare training, or was that part of some of the test work down here?
It was test work. They used it, the drones as a test bed. They used them for targets, basically, but they also used them for testing atomic effects and things where they didn't want to risk a pilot and find out what happens.
Who would have dreamed now that drones are so much more? It's a lot more practical to fly a drone than send a pilot out there.
Yes, well, and of course, now that we talk about drones, I said those aren't the kind of drones that I know about.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, in those days they were using what had been aircraft that had been flown by pilots, but you were flying them remotely then.
Yes. It was a wonderful experience. And anyway, that was my introduction to this part of the world and Florida, and I had a blind date with a school teacher.
Okay.
And the school teacher and I married in 1956, and we've been married ever since.
Okay. Now, how many years were you at Duke, and were you ever stationed any other time in the as part of the Eglin complex?
No, I wasn't.
Okay.
Duke was it.
How many years were you there?
Oh, a couple of years,
Okay.
and that was it.
And from Duke Field, then what did your Air Force career take you to?
Oh, I went to, the Air Force sent me back to Ohio State to study a field called geodetic science, which I was interested in. And from there we went to Shaw, and then all over the world. We've had 2 overseas tours, one in Germany, and my final tour was I had a squadron in Japan, which was in the intelligence business.
Well, at what point did you decide to buy the house here on the island?
Oh, I didn't. I had the house built. I designed it. I'd had some architectural training, and I designed it and had a contractor build it. Jenny's uncle, my wife's uncle, built one of the first houses out here, and I said, Uncle Mac, if you ever see any good property, let me know. And he sent me a wire and said, you just bought lot so-and-so on the island. So, so that was my lease, and I bought a lease way back in the very beginning, and I finally had a contractor build a house.
Okay. So how long have you now lived? You say you've lived here, what, since the 70s?
Yes.
Okay.
73.
Okay. Well, now, what is unique, of course, that this island is, I guess, technically Air Force property, but it is leased to landholders, and there's other places, Jekyll Island, Georgia is like that, where the government agent, in this case it's the state of Georgia up there, and then the landowner gets a 99-year lease and builds a home on it.
Well, this property, I may be a little off base on this, but the original patent for the state of Florida that I read comes down to Santa Rosa Sound and proceeds down the river, comes down Santa Rosa Sound, excluding this island. This island was federal property. And to the best of my knowledge, that was changed only gradually, but this property was acquired from the federal government. Okaloosa Island was acquired from federal government with certain strings attached to it, what they were going to use it for. And once Okaloosa County acquired it, then they decided to lease it out, and the state legislature formed an island authority, which Jerry Melvin was, who taught me about politics. Jerry Melvin was one of the early managers of it, and they had the island designed and leased. And yes, I was one of the original leaseholders.
And of course, you don't go much further west from where we are, and you get to where you're now on the military part of the island.
You're back on the military part of the island, yes.
Right. And that goes all the way over till you get almost to Navarre.
Almost to Navarre, and then you have Navarre, and the whole thing's been acquired through the military, as the federal legislation says, the Department of War leasing these or turning these chunks over to the adjacent counties.
And now you're involved in a part of the, quote, government kind of stuff here on the island. You had a meeting this morning of a part of this that you're involved in with somebody who's going to build anything out here.
The architecture committee, the original covenants, as I say, all of this property was leased to individuals by the county. And as a part of that lease, there were certain restrictions, what you could do and what you couldn't do with the property. And those are codified in the covenants, which everybody talks about. And those covenants still apply on this island, not conventional land use zoning that applies every place else in the county. And what the architecture committee does is it looks at any plan for use of property on the island, construction or usage, and says it either complies with the covenants or it doesn't comply with the covenants. And if it doesn't comply with the covenants, we tell the people how they can get some help. We can't waive anything, but we tell them how to go about that. And we meet once a week.
Right. Well, as I turned on Santa Rosa Boulevard to come out here to where you are, I noticed several signs on properties on what I would call the water. Well, you got water on both sides, but on the intracoastal side, perfect for condo or something. But looked like there were houses more or less on either side. But I gather there's no more land to go out on. It's got to go up nowadays if you're going to build something or replace something old. And I gather that there's still people want to build more of these high-rise condos out here on the island.
But you can only go 75 feet.
Okay.
On Okaloosa Island.
Okay. Period.
That's it. And that's part of the original 1953. I can't remember the dates, but the original federal document that transferred this to the county, there was an aviation easement of 75 feet.
Sure.
And we've maintained that.
Well, let's talk about, when did you get involved? I guess Jerry Melvin kind of encouraged you to help him out with what he was doing. I remember when back in the 70s he was they had some nicknames for him. State legislator in the House of Representatives. And his old desk from the old Capitol is now in the Archive Museum area over here in Valparaiso.
Well, Jerry Melvin asked me, as I say, when I came back, I built this house. Had a contractor's license.
You were retired from the service?
Yes, retired from the service. And Jerry asked me, he said one day, would you consider being an aide for me, legislative aide? And I said, Jerry, I'd love to. He said, do you know how to type? And I said, my mother said I couldn't touch a typewriter until I learned the touch system. So yes, I do know how to type.
Okay. Okay.
And anyway, I went to work for Jerry, worked for him for a year, and it was a wonderful introduction to the government for the way civil government works. For me, Jerry was a wonderful mentor. I couldn't have had a better one. And Jerry.
Now, how did you work for a Democratic member of the legislature? Were you a Democrat at that time, or what?
No, I've never been a Democrat. I told Jerry when he asked me, I said, Jerry, I'm a Republican. He says, I don't care what you are as long as you work for me. And I said, well, I'll do that. I said, I was an aide to Richard Nixon's family during his first inauguration, and I said, that's the only time I've ever been an aide, but I'll certainly learn how to aid for you.
Okay. So from that time, when did it happen, and did somebody encourage you or motivate you to run as a Republican for a county commissioner in Okaloosa County?
No, nobody encouraged me. Some things happened out here that were contrary to the covenants that were permitted by Okaloosa County after the Island Authority was abolished.
Okay.
And I was angry about it, and I said, hey, don't gripe unless you're willing to do something about it. And that's when I decided to become a county commissioner. And when I registered here, I was told, you're a Republican? I said, yes. And they said, well, you know, you really should be a Democrat. And I said, no, I'm a Republican.
Okay.
But what I found out when I was elected and entered the government, I found out that Southern Democrats are really Republicans.
Yes. Like I did in the 50s, that the Southern Democrats of South Georgia weren't like the Democrats I grew up with in the Chicago suburbs. So then you got, tell me about that first election. What happened?
Well,
How many votes were, can you remember about how many thousand votes? The county was pretty small back then.
well, we counted votes. Ginny and I helped count votes for 3 days, and I won by 26 votes. I won the first election by 26 votes. I didn't know anything about absentee ballots, and I didn't campaign to get any absentee ballots. Well, that was a terrible, terrible mistake. And but I was welcomed into the operation. Cecil Ankers, who was clerk of court, traditional clerk of court, welcomed me and said, "Mike, if there's anything I can do to help you, let me know." He toured me through the old Crestview Courthouse, the original Crestview Courthouse, and showed me all the rooms and where everything was. And
Okay. Now, what year would that have been?
1976.
Okay, so that would have been the courthouse that they just tore down.
Yes.
The kind of
yes.
in between modern looking one. Gotcha.
Yes.
Okay. And so you served a 4-year term.
Yes.
And what kind of things did you get to feel like you were able to get to happen in that 4 years?
Well, I kind of changed the conversation. I didn't have any old school ties here.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't have any cousins working for the county.
So you weren't kidding with any of what they call the good old boys.
And but I got along very well with Hayward Hayes, who was a longtime county commissioner here. Hayward and I got along very, very well. And they made me chairman of the hospital board, which at that point in time, Okaloosa County ran 3 hospitals. And did I know anything about hospitals at that time? No, I knew nothing about hospitals, but I'm a fairly fast study, and I learned, and I thought, you know, county really ought not to be running hospitals. Anyway, with the help of several of the other commissioners, we were able to sell the hospitals to HCA under very, very favorable conditions, and the medical situation in the county has greatly improved since they took over the hospital system and replaced them.
Okay.
That was probably my first significant move.
Okay. And then you decided to run for re-election. Did you have any opposition in your first run again? Your run for your second term?
Yes, I'm sure I did. I'm sure I did. But the thing about county government that makes it attractive to me is it's the closest thing to perfect government. The people that are served, you, me, the rest of us, have a direct line to the people they elect. Mm-hmm. They can pick up the phone, my phone. I didn't realize any of this when I got into the job, but it rang all the time. Somebody's neighbor's dog barked. We have raccoons in the backyard. You know, what do we do about this? Well, Mike doesn't really know what to do about raccoons, but I can find some people that do.
Okay.
And it was a wonderful introduction to the county. And the government's small enough that everybody knows you.
Mm-hmm. Well, good. Now, when did other people begin to either change? Were there any time that, I know in some areas I have lived, Democrats, particularly during the Reagan era, changed their affiliation while they were still in office even. Did any of that occur with any of the commissioners at that era, or were there just new candidates that came along?
New candidates came along.
Ran as Republicans.
New candidates came along, and there were some old-time Republicans. The Tyner sisters, who were old-time people here, they'd always been Republicans.
Yeah.
Nobody knew about them, but they were Republicans,
Okay.
and they supported. And Mattie Kelly out in Destin, who was not a Republican, but she always supported me. And it, as I say, it was. I feel like an old timer here.
Yeah. Okay, so then when did you finally discover the importance of absentee ballots? And there was an election that really made, when the election results were known Tuesday night, you were behind until they counted absentee ballots the next day.
I learned that going up to the second election. I mean, before the second election, I learned about it. And that's when I sent out the little cards that you see.
Okay, the postcard.
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
And it worked. The absentee ballots absolutely worked.
Right. Well, along in that era, of course, the military vote, and still is true today, is a big chunk of absentee voters. Those who choose to make this as their home, even though they're assigned elsewhere.
Oh, yes.
I remember that in the supervisor's office, there's a map up there that has little tacks for all the different people from absentee, and there's one little tack in the island of Diego Garcia in the Indian Ocean. And it turned out that map tack was for a friend of mine, Bob Benson, who used to go there. He lives in Crestview now. He doesn't go there anymore, but he was there 6 months every year. I was living on a ship doing radio communications, under, I guess, the Merchant Marine or something.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, I have voted in every election since I've been old enough to vote. But until I retired from the military, it was always by absentee ballot.
Right. Well, of course, this county now is predominantly Republican. I don't think we have any elected Democratic people in holding office in this county. There may be some council members who are that way. Now, there may be some school board members because they're nonpartisan when they run. They may belong to either any party or no party. But as far as county commissioners and the like, the city council people run nonpartisan, so they can be affiliated either way. But all of your other constitutional officers and county commissioners are all Republican now. And in the 1976 election, I'm going to say Okaloosa County had to be in the top tier of counties for Mr. Trump because he had 70.4% of the vote here in this county. We were talking about that this county now is, predominantly votes Republican, conservative, and of course there's a big military vote. But then what has happened is there's many people, and before you even, who they got stationed here once. And I said, man, that's a wonderful place to go back and live. And I've got a friend that not long ago retired as a I think full colonel, and had his party on Friday. Monday morning, he was back at the same office doing something else under a contract. And so the revenue, family average revenues in our county is above the state average because of that, I think.
Well, and it's also an advantage we have. We have a variety of people here.
Right.
Different training, different background, but all here because they like it.
Mm-hmm. And, of course, that makes a good pool of labor for all of the 300-plus contractors firms that are in this area because of this military installation.
Yes, and the military does give you a great variety of technical background. When people retire the military, they've done all kinds of things that can be turned into other efforts.
And we can all thank a guy who decided to move from the Chicago area and buy that land that Mr. Perrine had bought before, and he brought his Curtiss biplane here and cut a little grass airstrip for it, and today we have Eglin.
Yes, yeah, absolutely.
And everything else that goes with Eglin.
Absolutely, everything that goes with it. Walt Ruckel used to tell me about, some of the early background
Of his grandpa.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So what do you see for now? You look at the world today and the political stuff that we're going through, it's a bit different than it was in the 70s or in the 50s.
Well, yes, it changes. We grow up. I guess that has to be the only. We evolve, and things change. And I like the way it's going right now from the standpoint that it's decisive. No, none of this political correctness, which I've never had much patience for. Call it the way you see it. When you draw a line in the sand, somebody steps over it, you hit them.
Well, Okaloosa County Commissioners are proud to brag that they have almost always just about the lowest millage rate anywhere in the state of Florida. Sometimes Monroe County gets down there, but Monroe County, which includes the Keys, and Okaloosa County both have one thing in common: a lot of beautiful condominiums and tourist dollars and properties that don't have homestead exemption on them because they're part-time homes, and that contributes to the tax base for sure. But then, of course, it's nice because both cases were near lots of waterfront too. But what do you think of Okaloosa County government and what it's doing today?
Okay, I'm totally happy with the way the county government's currently run. And during the time that I was there, we used to pride ourselves on having the lowest millage in Florida, and we did consistently have the lowest millage in Florida. And there was a reason for it, because we have other sources here that help us pay the base. And
well, Mike, I tell you what, I appreciate your taking some time out here from your busy days.
I appreciate being talked to and asked the questions.
Well, and I hope that the old timers that remember when you started this, let's make the changes you did over the years, that county government is better for the time that you got invested and involved in it.
Well, but in county government and city governments, and I've never been part of a city government, but I'm sure the same thing applies. This is the closest thing to what we all think our government, the way government should run. It's closer to the people. They know you and you know them. And if you do something they don't like, they pick up the phone, they talk to you.
Great. Mike, thanks so much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. And that's a Z-Files on the Road, an interesting trip with a little bit of history right up through today, as we're visiting here with Mike Mitchell, the guy who was the first elected Republican official office holder in Okaloosa County. Now, just about everybody is.